My wife joked the paternity test I took was silly insecurity. It showed I wasn't the father. Then I had her lower security tested using a spilled drink DNA sample. It was a match. I presented both tests to her lawyer when she demanded child support. Her lawyer was speechlessly calling her. Let me start from the beginning. It started 6 months ago when our daughter turned 3. She had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through you, nothing like mine or my wife's brown ones. When I mentioned this to friends, they'd joke about recessive genes, but something gnawed at me. My wife caught me staring at our daughter one evening and laughed it off, saying I was being ridiculously insecure and that DNA tests were for paranoid husbands and trashy TV shows. Her dismissive tone only amplified my doubts. I'd been feeling disconnected from her for months. She worked late frequently, came home smelling different, and had become protective of her phone in ways that seemed new. When I suggested family time, she'd claim exhaustion or important work calls. The breaking point came during a family barbecue. My brother made an offhand comment about how our daughter looked nothing like either of us. My wife's reaction was swift and sharp, telling him to mind his own business. But it was the look she exchanged with her sister afterward that made my stomach drop. They both knew something I didn't. That night, after my wife fell asleep, I made the decision. I ordered a paternity test online, using a strand of hair from our daughter's brush and my own saliva sample. The waiting period felt endless. I went through the motions of normal life, while my mind raced with possibilities and consequences. When the results arrived, I opened them alone in my car outside work. Not the father. The words blurred as I read them again. 3 years of bedtime stories, first steps, countless diaper changes, and loving a child I believed was mine. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I needed more information before confronting her. If she could lie about this, what else had she hidden? I started paying closer attention to her routine, her phone calls, her reactions. She mentioned her trainer more frequently than seemed normal, always with a slight smile that made my skin crawl. The plan formed slowly. I needed proof of the affair to understand the complete picture. Her trainer worked at a gym downtown, and I knew from her stories that he was recently divorced with a young son. She'd even commented on how the boy looked surprisingly mature for his age, with distinctive blue eyes. I waited for the right opportunity. It came during our daughter's birthday party at a local restaurant. My wife insisted on inviting her trainer, claiming he'd become a good family friend. I watched them interact throughout the evening. The way he looked at our daughter, the protective stance he took when she got too close to other children, the familiarity between them that went beyond professional boundaries. During dinner, I orchestrated my move. I brought a bottle of wine and deliberately bumped into him while pouring drinks, spilling red wine across his white shirt. While apologizing profusely and helping him clean up, I collected the stained fabric in a napkin, claiming I'd pay for dry cleaning. He brushed it off good-naturedly, but I had what I needed. The second DNA test took another agonizing 2 weeks. This time, I wasn't surprised by the results. He was the father. My wife had been having an affair for at least 4 years, possibly longer. Our entire marriage during that period had been built on deception. I spent the next month consulting with a divorce attorney and gathering financial records. I discovered she'd been transferring money to a separate account I didn't know about. Credit card statements showed hotel charges on days she claimed to be working late. The evidence painted a clear picture of systematic betrayal. The confrontation I'd been dreading never came. Instead, she served me with divorce papers first, claiming irreconcilable differences. Her lawyer's letter included a demand for substantial child support and alimony. She was trying to get ahead of whatever she thought I might have discovered. I let her believe she had the upper hand. Through our initial mediation sessions, I acted defeated and resigned. She grew increasingly confident, even smugly mentioning how courts favor mothers in custody battles. Her lawyer pushed harder on financial demands, sensing what they perceived as weakness. The day I presented both DNA tests was carefully planned. I'd arranged for the meeting to be recorded, as required by law in our state. Her lawyer had been outlining their enhanced support requirements when I quietly placed the documents on the table. Her lawyer's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she read the first test. My wife initially seemed puzzled, then I watched understanding dawn across her face. The second test result hit like a physical blow. Her lawyer immediately requested a brief recess, practically dragging my wife into the hallway. Through the thin conference room walls, I I could hear urgent whispers and what sounded like desperate explanations. When they returned 20 minutes later, her lawyer's entire demeanor had changed. Professional confidence had been replaced by damage control mode. My wife sat silently while her lawyer explained their need to reassess their position. They withdrew all support demands immediately. Her trainer, now confirmed as the biological father, would be responsible for child support. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd have to pursue support from the man who'd helped destroy our marriage. The property division suddenly became much more favorable to me. Assets she'd expected to claim were no longer on the table. The separate account I discovered became relevant to discussions about hidden marital funds. Her lawyer advised settling quickly to avoid potential fraud charges. But the most devastating blow came when I revealed I'd already filed for full custody. Given the deception about paternity and evidence of the affair, family court would likely view her unfavorably. Her trainer had no legal standing since he wasn't on the birth certificate, and establishing paternity would take months of legal proceedings. My wife finally spoke, asking if we could discuss this privately. I declined. Everything that needed to be said would go through lawyers. She'd made her choices over years of deception, and now she'd live with the consequences. The proceedings moved quickly after that. She agreed to joint custody with me as primary guardian, no alimony, and an equal split of marital assets minus what she'd hidden in her separate account. Her trainer would handle child support once paternity was legally established. Update 1. 3 weeks later, her lawyer called mine with an interesting development. My wife's trainer had disappeared. He'd quit his job at the gym, broken his lease, and left no forwarding address. Mutual friends claimed he'd mentioned a job opportunity in another state, but nobody had details. This left my wife in a precarious position. Without him available for legal paternity testing, she couldn't establish his obligation for child support. She was now facing single motherhood with limited resources and no financial support from the biological father. Her desperation became apparent when she began calling me directly, despite her lawyer's advice. She suggested reconciliation, claiming the affair had been a mistake and that we could work things out for our daughter's sake. I reminded her that our daughter wasn't biologically mine, something she'd hidden for years. She then tried a different approach, suggesting I could continue being the father figure since I'd already bonded with the child. The audacity was staggering. She wanted me to provide financial and emotional support for another man's child while she faced no consequences for her deception. Update 2. The custody hearing took an unexpected turn. My wife's lawyer had hired a private investigator to locate her trainer, hoping to establish his paternity and financial responsibility. They found him working at a gym in another state, but he'd already consulted with his own attorney. His lawyer contacted the court with a shocking revelation. He was disputing paternity entirely, claiming my wife had been involved with multiple men during the relevant time period. He demanded his own DNA test and was preparing to fight any support obligations. This news hit my wife like a sledgehammer. She'd assumed he would accept responsibility once confronted with evidence. Instead, he was throwing her under the bus and suggesting she'd been even more promiscuous than anyone knew. The judge ordered comprehensive paternity testing for all parties and postponed custody decisions pending results. My wife sat in stunned silence as her carefully constructed narrative fell apart. She'd lost her marriage, faced potential loss of custody, and now even the man she'd destroyed her family for was abandoning her. Update 3. The final test results confirmed what we already knew, but the legal implications were profound. With the trainer's paternity established despite his protests, he was ordered to pay child support. However, his income was significantly lower than mine, meaning the monthly amount would barely cover basic necessities. My wife was awarded joint custody, but I remained the primary guardian. She'd have our daughter on alternating weekends and one evening per week. The stark contrast between her expectations and reality was evident in her defeated posture during the final hearing. The property settlement was finalized with her receiving significantly less than she'd originally demanded. The hidden account funds were applied toward my legal fees, and she was responsible for her own attorney costs. Her dream of profiting from the divorce had become a financial nightmare. 6 months after everything concluded, I received an unexpected call from her sister. My wife had been struggling emotionally and financially. She'd lost her job due to the stress and distraction of the legal proceedings. Her trainer had moved again, making support collection difficult. She was essentially a single mother working part-time jobs to make ends meet. Her sister suggested I might consider increasing my support voluntarily for our daughter's well-being. I explained that the child wasn't biologically mine, something her sisters seemed to have forgotten. The conversation ended quickly. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. My wife had joked about DNA tests being for insecure husbands, yet those same tests had revealed the truth she desperately tried to hide. Her mockery had become the instrument of her downfall. I'd moved into a smaller apartment and was rebuilding my life. The emotional attachment to the child I'd raised was complicated, but I'd made peace with the boundaries the situation required. She would always be part of my life through shared experiences, but I wasn't obligated to support another man's child financially. My wife's trainer had thought he could disappear and avoid responsibility, but modern legal systems make it difficult to truly vanish. Wage garnishments followed him to his new state, and his attempts to dispute paternity had only delayed the inevitable. The final lesson in this entire ordeal was about truth and consequences. Years of deception had seemed manageable to my wife until the foundation of lies collapsed. Her assumption that I'd never investigate, her trainer's belief that he could abandon responsibility, and both their underestimation of legal accountability had combined to create their downfall. Looking back, I realized the signs had always been there. Her defensive reactions, unexplained absences, emotional distance, and that particular smile when mentioning certain people. I'd ignored my instincts in favor of trust, something I wouldn't make the mistake of doing again. The DNA tests that had seemed like such a violation of trust to her had ultimately protected me from years of continued deception. Sometimes the most uncomfortable truths are the most necessary ones to uncover. She'd gambled our marriage, our family, and her future on the assumption that her lies would remain hidden. When they didn't, she'd tried to manipulate the divorce proceedings to her advantage. But truth has a way of surfacing, especially when there's documented evidence and legal scrutiny involved. The child support she demanded from me was now coming from the man who'd actually fathered her daughter. The custody she'd expected to use as leverage had become a shared responsibility that limited her control. The financial settlement she'd hoped would provide security had been reduced by her own deceptive actions. In the end, her joke about DNA tests had become the punchline of her own undoing. The evidence had spoken louder than her protests. The truth had prevailed over her manipulations, and consequences had followed naturally from choices she'd made years earlier. I'd learned that trust, once broken, reveals the true character of everyone involved. Some people accept responsibility and work toward redemption. Others double down on deception and manipulation until they've destroyed every bridge behind them. My former wife had chosen the latter path, and now she was living with results that would impact her for years to come. The brief satisfaction of her affair had cost her marriage, financial security, primary custody of her daughter, and apparently her career stability as well. The story serves as a reminder that actions have consequences, lies eventually surface, and sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. But it also demonstrates that truth, however painful initially, ultimately provides the foundation for moving forward with clarity and purpose.